From Inkwell, this is the daily best of for Tuesday, July 21st. I'm Keli with Haste. The biggest stories of the day. What held? What moved? The Iran campaign is now in its 11th consecutive night. U.S. strikes were reported in Tabriz in the northwest, Tehran, and in southern Iran. Defense Secretary Hegseth said the campaign has cost $37.5 billion to date. President Trump separately threatened to strike a site referred to as Pickaxe Mountain, described as a suspected nuclear facility.
Two numbers buried in the coverage. 11 nights is an extended air campaign by any modern standard. $37.5 billion is a figure that, if accurate, would rank this among the most expensive short-term military operations in recent U.S. history. Neither number got much comparative context in the reporting we reviewed.
Inside Iran itself, residents are describing daily life under compounding pressure. Rising food costs, electricity blackouts running hours at a stretch, and infrastructure that was already degraded before U.S. strikes added to the damage.
Coverage of the U.S.-Iran confrontation has focused heavily on missile exchanges and nuclear talks. The civilian infrastructure story has moved slower. What's on the record from aid organizations and Iranian economists is that the combination of sanctions, mismanagement, and now direct damage is hitting ordinary households in ways that don't resolve when the shooting stops.
Iraq is drawing increased attention as a potential regional stabilizer amid the wider Middle East pressure. Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi was in Washington last week. Analysts describe Iraq as positioning itself as a strategic connector, trying to balance relationships with the U.S., Iran, and Gulf states simultaneously.
The relevant tension is that Iraq's leverage depends on all those relationships staying active at once. A direct U.S.-Iran conflict, now ongoing, compresses that space considerably. Iraq does not get to be a connector if the parties it is connecting are in a shooting war.
Lebanon's president told Donald Trump this week that Beirut's ultimate objective is to end hostilities with Israel permanently. President Aoun used the word forever.
The framing in most coverage treated this as a diplomatic milestone. The structural fact it skipped is that Lebanon has almost no leverage to enforce that objective. The country is still in post-war reconstruction. Hezbollah's political position inside Lebanon is unresolved, and ceasefire monitoring mechanisms remain contested. Forever is an aspiration, not a mechanism.
Before we close, the rest of the story, not more headlines. How the press ignored, softened, or twisted the structure of today's biggest stories to fit the narrative they already had.
On the record beat, Israel/Lebanon. What the media did. Headlines led with the leaked fury. Trump called Bibi crazy, steamrolled him, prison without Trump, etc. The on-record sequence, Trump's own productive post, Netanyahu's public contradiction, then leak-based outrage, was rarely walked as one timeline. It inverted the usual ground news fracture, instead of bury eye.
Why it matters. You cannot evaluate the relationship from the leak alone. Trump said productive and ceasefire on his account. Netanyahu said unchanged, and Beirut on his. The press sold the background quote as the story, and dissolved the public split between the two men who actually posted. That.
On the record beat, NDAA/military integration. What the media did, Responsible Statecraft and Al Jazeera, reported the provision as Congress quietly advancing unprecedented military integration, often as a defense tech sidebar inside the trillion-dollar NDAA, not as a structural shift from annual aid votes to embedded industrial merger. Massikana pushback ran as bipartisan odd C.
Why it matters. The merge is in the bill text, not a leak. It would institutionalize coordination in the Pentagon's acquisition machinery, where oversight is thinner than an annual foreign aid debate. Massey and Khanna said so on their own accounts. The sponsors put the language in a public draw.
Same pattern as the Lusitania warnings Germany paid to place in American newspapers. The papers chose not to run them, and people died who might have lived. When the press buries the structural fact, the audience does not get a second chance at the truth that night.
Today in history. July 21st, 1925. The Scopes Monkey trial reached its verdict in Dayton, Tennessee. Guilty as charged. A high school teacher had broken state law by teaching evolution.
What made it a press story wasn't the verdict itself, it was the machinery around it. Radio carried live courtroom testimony for the first time in American history. Newspapers sent hundreds of reporters. The trial became a proxy war over whose truth would dominate the narrative.
The coverage split sharply. Urban papers framed it as science versus dogma. Rural outlets saw it as outside elites attacking local values. Both sides were reading different accounts of the same event. That's the Daily Best of for Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. Full archive at inkwell.wiki/news. The rest of the story. More at inkwell.wiki/ground news.
Independent news drops resume tomorrow, 6 a.m., 2 p.m., and 10 p.m. Central. From Inkwell, good night.